You got to unmute yourself.
Okay, this is Vin Tell from Newport News. Senator Warner, first I want to thank you for reaching out to our community through Alice and meet us at this Zoom meeting. We appreciate what you have done to help the Asian American, especially the Chinese American community during this turbulent time. I will be asking you a few questions connected from the Hampton Road community. The first question is from Dr. Xu, a NASA scientist in Yorktown. Senator Warner, we understand you co-sponsored the bill S-386. However, there are concerns in many minority groups, in particular Chinese American community, about this bill. According to a Congressional Research Service study, this bill will impose unintended consequences, create a significant backlog for applicants from many countries, including China. If it becomes law in the current form, the bill will make it hard for graduate students trained in the US to obtain EB2 visa, which is a kind of visa for professionals with advanced degrees. Dr. Xu, personally, his path to citizenship was through this type of visa. This will result in a brain drain to the US economy, just to name one of the many adverse effects of this bill. You just mentioned you wanted to encourage Chinese students to study in the US and stay here to work and start business. So we want to know if you are willing to reconsider your support for this bill due to these unintended consequences, or if you are willing to modify the current version of this bill to avoid these adverse effects.
This bill, as you know, dealt with country caps, and it was this is again where one group of students were versus another, and it frankly probably gave more favorable treatment to the Indian community over the Chinese or other communities. I have been part of a negotiation that would amend the bill, and um, Senator Dick Durbin has been leading an effort to make sure this bill is fairer not only to Chinese students, but to African students and South American students. And we expect to announce shortly an amended version of the bill that will, I think the community will find is much fairer. So yes, I have been willing to work on amending. There is a compromise that is being worked out. It was between Senator Mike Lee and Senator Dick Durbin, and I think you'll see in the next week or so an amended version of that bill come out that will be. You may not still like it 100%, but if it was 80% bad, it's much less. I think, and we should talk about once the compromise is out if there are other ways it could be improved. We're still a long ways away from that bill becoming law, and I heard from not just the Chinese communities, but many communities about S386. So I am willing to change that.
Thank you for your answer on where we'll be anticipating to see the compromise that you will reach with other senators. Again, we have very deep concerns about this bill. We don't want to see our local Chinese community being decimated in the years to come. And we strongly urge you to be cautious about this bill. And we hope to keep the communication channel open with your team regarding this topic.
I will. Let me also say that one of the things with um, H1B and other bills that particularly bring in high skill, um, the process already takes way too long. Someone is starting the process today, it might be 40, 50 years before you get your full green card. That needs to be reformed, and it needs to be speeded up. People should not have to be in that long of uncertain status. Um, I've also supported very strongly uh, comprehensive immigration reform that would give a path to citizenship, but would also um, expand the H-1B program.
Will that be part of the compromise you mentioned?
Well, I think on the S-386, it will just be a bill around compromise around S-386. the larger immigration reform, and that was back in like 2011 or 12. Honestly, that will not take place until and unless there's a Biden administration. There will not be comprehensive immigration reform under this president.
Okay, thank you. Now the second question. The nation has never been so divided under the Trump administration. Being an election year only makes it worse. Each party warns that electing the other side to power will cause existential threat to the nation. What's your take on how to heal the division of this country?
That's a very, very important question. Um, and listen, I wanted Mr. Trump to succeed when he became president. I didn't support him, but I wanted him to succeed. But I have seen nothing, even in the last 2 months, I've seen nothing that will indicate to me that he wants to bring the country back together. I think about when he uh, when he in, when he rejected and insulted all of our veterans a few weeks ago, or then when he said he didn't tell the truth about the virus, or just in the last few days when he said he would not agree to a peaceful transfer of power. In many ways, it seems like Mr. Trump is urging his supporters, um, to try to intimidate people about voting. I mean, we saw in Fairfax County last Saturday um, armed individuals uh, going up and trying to intimidate voters. I think that is something that happens in authoritarian countries. It should not happen in the United States. Um, I do think, and Joe Biden may not be perfect by any means, but I do think Joe Biden, just his personality, separate from all his views, just his personality is one that would be about trying to be inclusive. My recommendation, if Joe Biden wins, for him to immediately go to those parts of the country that didn't vote for him and say, we're all Americans. And because my fear is if we continue to think there is a red America and a blue America, um, you know, that is not good for our country. And then when we see in activities in Brazil, or when we see activities in Hungary, we see the rise of authoritarian leaders in many places around the world. And I think we have to fight against that, regardless of what our politics are. This is so much bigger than Democrat versus Republican or a single election. The thing that has made America great is that we are the only country where in the first generation you can come here, be an American, and be every bit as American as anyone else who's been here for 10 generations. And my fear is that sometimes is not the view that Mr. Trump has.
Thank you. Thank you for answering to this question. The next question from Ms. Yan of Yorktown. I was disappointed that I didn't hear anything about law and order during the Democratic National Convention. I was worried this would be weaponized by the Republican Party to attack the Democrats, which turned out to be true. I'm also worried the moderate Democrats will be hijacked by the far left, just like the Republican Party was hijacked by Donald Trump. What position do you think Democrats should take on the law and order issue? And what Democratic Party should do to avoid being taken over by the far left?
Well, let me be very clear to that question. While I think there is need for reform in our criminal justice, in our policing system, I think there are too many Black Americans, Brown Americans, Asian Americans who are not treated fairly by the police. I also believe very strongly that if someone is a vigilante with a gun, or someone is about to throw a brick through the window, they are both criminals and they need to be prosecuted. I stand up very strong, have always stood up very strong. Back to when I was governor, we made major investments, both police and state police. I do think at times we need to do a better job of training our police officers, because in the United States, it sometimes only takes 10 weeks to go through a police training system. In many European countries and Asian countries, it takes 2 to 3 years. And part of our challenge in this country is I believe we have too many guns on the street, and I think we can all agree to have some reasonable gun restrictions in terms of a background checks and prohibiting, military firearms, assault weapons on our streets. But I strongly, um, uh, stand up for law and order. And let me also say, I hope people on this call, and I believe people in Virginia know me. I have, as governor and as senator, have always had a more moderate record. Um, all of the bills I work on, I've had 55 bills become law. I've always had a Republican partner, and there have been times inside the Democratic Party where I have had to pay a penalty because I've been tried to be too bipartisan. But I give you my promise on this. I've been very blessed. I am, as Bailey said, I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. I've been very fortunate to have some economic success. No one from either extreme, left or right, is going to push me into doing something that I don't believe in. I can be an independent. I've been an independent. I've stood up against my party, for example, on trying to make sure that we didn't overly burden businesses with red tape, and when we tried to do major reforms to our community banks. I have a record of standing for what I believe, even if that's not party popular amongst some in my party. For example, I believe very much we have to take care of climate change, but I don't think the Green New Deal is the right approach. So there are many, many people, and Alice again sometimes gets mad at me on this, but my record of being bipartisan and my record for standing up against the far left or the far right, I promise if I get reelected, if I can earn your vote again, I promise to continue those positions.
Thank you, Senator Warner. Yeah, personally, I've never been so worried about the future of this country. Thank you for your reassuring words. So those are the questions from Hampton Road. Now I'm going to yield it back to Alice.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'll do the rest of the Q&A.